Today is one of those fun days for MLB DFS where you have three legitimate starting pitching options who are actual studs. You can feel good about across the board, both from a floor perspective and a ceiling perspective. And that's a good thing. It's also not like opening day where we have too many choices where it kind of gets overwhelming. So to me, it's almost the ideal slate. 8-game slate, not too much to go through there. You've got some good stacking options. We got Coors Field in play, but it's not perfect Coors Field. So pretty much my perfect slate. So let's dive on in and get you set for Tuesday's main slate. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, or the solo shot, I should say, right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to get you set for Tuesday's main MLB DFS slate. Lock is set for 7:05 tonight. It is an 8-game slate and a couple of weather notes to break down here before we dive into the pitching preview, because as mentioned, it's not a perfect Coors Field for today. Just 50 degrees, the first pitch temperature in Denver. And that's noteworthy because that's down about 20 degrees from where it was last week. So it is still Coors Field. The outfield is still huge, but it's less Coorsy than it was then because the ball won't fly as well in the colder temperatures as it does during the warmer temperatures. Still a good park, not as good. It's also in the 50s in Seattle, Oakland, and Boston. So downgrade hitters for the White Sox, Mariners, Athletics, Dodgers, Rays, and Red Sox. And also upgrade pitchers there. We'll talk about a couple of pitchers in those parks in our pitching preview, and it does include a couple of the aces at the top of the pitching board for tonight. Quick reminder, we do have our Masters podcast already posted, getting you set for this weekend's action at Augusta. It's myself and Brandon Gandula. We broke it down yesterday here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. You can also find it up on the FanDuel YouTube page. If you want more Masters content, Brandon is back with you Tuesday, today, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. That will lead directly into our MLB DFS breakdown, which is at 4 p.m. today, as always. So tune in for Brandon at 3:30. Stick around for MLB DFS immediately after. Should be a fun little show there for sure to get you set for both the Masters and tonight's MLB DFS slate. As always, you can watch that YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter as well. Make sure you're subscribed on your platform of choice and get those questions in, both for Brandon and for me, later on today. Also, a lot of stuff here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. In addition to the Masters and this show, The Solo Shot, we also have UFC and NASCAR back this week with Austin Swaim on UFC, myself on NASCAR, and Tom Vecchio has you covered with NBA and NHL. So plenty of incentive to subscribe to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. And as always, if you like what you hear on any of those podcasts, make sure you leave us a rating and review as well. Speaking of the Masters, Green Jackets, Magnolia Lane, the granddaddy of them all. Golf fans, get ready. It's almost time for the 2021 Masters Tournament. For only $15, you can take a shot at competing for a part of the massive $1 million prize pool, with first place taking home $200,000. Head over to FanDuel and set your fantasy lineup for this year's Masters Tournament. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app today. Eligibility restrictions apply. Pitching preview for this Tuesday main slate. Tyler Glasnow is the highest salaried pitcher over on FanDuel for tonight. He checks in at $10,700. Yu Darvish is 10-2. Lucas Giolito is 9-6. Those are the three aforementioned aces here. Clayton Kershaw is $9,000. And then James Paxton and Marcus Stroman are the others at $8,000 or higher. And to me, it is really those top three guys, Glasnow, Darvish, and Giolito, as being the stud pitchers on this slate. And I love all of them. So if you love one more than the others, go with it. They're all very defensible, but I'm going to let circumstances dictate where I go, and that's going to make Giolito my top pitcher of the night. Giolito, tough assignment in his first start with the White Sox this year, coming against the Angels. They're a low strikeout team, but Giolito still got 8 strikeouts over 5 1/3 innings. He went 87 pitches, so he's pretty close to being fully stretched out, and he kept on using his slider, which is a good thing because that's something he did pretty early back in 2020. He was a big changeup guy in 2019. That led to his big breakout. Added the slider in 2020, and it helped him reach a new level of dominance. Over his past 10 starts with that usage on that slider being up, Giolito has a 3.21 skill interactive ERA with a 36% strikeout rate. Now he's putting that up against the Mariners. They have a 25% strikeout rate for their active roster against righties since the start of last year. There are a lot of lefties in this lineup, which means you do need to dig in to make sure Giolito can handle those lefties. But his best pitch is his changeup. And a little shortcut you can have in mind is guys who use changeups a lot tend to be better against opposite-handed hitters than guys who don't have changeups. And that does track with Giolito. He had a 35% strikeout rate versus lefties last year compared to 32% against righties. So he's a very good pitcher facing a non-threatening offense, and it looks like he is fully stretched out. That's a lot of boxes to check, and it's enough to make him my favorite option, even on a stacked slate. Also, as mentioned, Seattle, one of those parks that is cooler for tonight. 53 degrees, seems like they're okay keeping the roof open when that's the case, because I don't see any rain in the forecast for today, so probably going to be pretty cold temperatures. That's good for pitching. That's good for Giolito, and it makes him my number one guy for tonight. The second person, how you rank them, depends on your level of trust in the Rays, because if you think they let Tyler Glasnow go, you go with Glasnow. If you don't trust that, you go Yu Darvish. I feel kind of okay about Glasnow's pitch count, so I'm going to put him second on my list, but it's very defensible to go Darvish over Glasnow if you wanted the lone downside of Darvish, higher temperature for him than with Glasnow. Last time out, Glasnow went 77 pitches, which is similar to what he did in his debut last year in the abbreviated season. He was at 72 in July of last year. In his second start, that went up to 88. So I think projecting Glasnow for 90 pitches tonight sounds about right, and he can likely do a lot of damage on those 90 pitches. We talked going into his start last week about the new slider he was adding, and sometimes with new pitches, you'll see it used like 10 to 15% of the time, but we saw Glasnow throw that slider 34% of the time. That was 26 total pitches. He got 12 swings on it and 5 misses. So it was an effective pitch, and it's an upgrade for him to have that additional pitch inside his arsenal. I don't want to lean on a one-start sample too much with Giolito, or with Glasnow, I should say. So if we're trying to expand the sample here, we can look at his past 8 starts. And in those 8 starts, he's been leaning more on his off-speed stuff in general, mostly the curveball back then, but more off-speed stuff in that time. He has a 38% strikeout rate and a 2.72 skill interactive ERA. Both those numbers are the best marks on this slate. The Red Sox active roster has a 23% strikeout rate against righties since the start of last year. That is 2 percentage points higher than Darvish's opponent, but also 2 percentage points lower than Giolito's. I also feel better about the length for Giolito. But as long as you think that Glasnow's going 90 pitches tonight, I think he's number 2. Based on last year, I do think that will be the case, so he will be number 2 for me. So it's Giolito 1, Glasnow 2, Darvish 3, but all 3 of them very worthy of looks. Darvish had the longest pitch count in his first start, so you could definitely put him at the top if you wanted. I just have him third, and again, I love Yu Darvish, so me putting him third is not saying I don't like him. Which happens to be number 3 for me for tonight. Fun dilemma to have, have 3 legitimate aces available for this slate. Now, I don't feel great about our third pitcher, so to me, it's nice to focus on the aces. I would definitely have Darvish ranked above them. But if I am going to go down, find a value pitcher for tonight, I need someone who can get strikeouts to hang with the studs, because the pitching numbers on tonight's slate will be very high. One guy who could do that is Freddie Peralta. He's $6,400 in facing the Cubs. Peralta pitched in relief back on opening day, and it was the most Freddie Peralta showing of all time. He had 6 strikeouts in 2 innings. That is as many as you can have, unless you have a pass ball. But it took him 53 pitches to get there. So the old issues with Freddie Peralta are not gone. They are very much still there. But there were some interesting things in what he did there. Primarily, we saw Peralta working in a changeup a bit. He threw it 9.4% of the time. He didn't throw a single changeup all of last year. It wasn't a great pitch for him in that outing by any means, but it's at least interesting that he did go there. And he had really good velocity. He was a reliever last year, too. So it's not just because he's coming out of the bullpen. It's an apples-to-apples comparison. But his fastball velocity was up almost 3 miles per hour. His slider was up, too. He's facing a Cubs team that will strike out, 26% strikeout rate for them against righties since the start of last year. So there's upside within Freddie Peralta's situation and his talent for this slate. Pitch count should be there. He had 53 pitches in relief last week. He threw 85 back on March 21st, back in the spring, and he was awesome this spring. 23 strikeouts in 13 2/3 innings to earn this 5th starter job. So the floor on Peralta is pretty bad, and that's why I don't want to have much, and I want to focus on the other 3 pitchers. But there's a path to a ceiling. You don't get that for $6,400 all that often. So he is a distant 4th option for me tonight behind Darvish and the other 2, but I do think that he is a defensible play, and I could see myself getting to Peralta. It would just take a decent number of lineups for me to get there, because I do think that he grades out being worse than those three legitimate studs. So to me, it's Giolito 1, Glasnow 2, Darvish 3, and then Peralta if you do want a value option for this slate. And one reason you could want a value option is because we do have Coors Field. We got the Rockies and the Diamondbacks there as we transition into the stacks, and I think they're fine. We got the low temperatures. We're using high salaried pitchers. I can't burn both two stacking slots on this game. So while I like the Diamondbacks, they're going to get pushed down for me, especially with the temperatures being what they are. German Marquez is fine, and they're not that good offensively. So I'll go with the Rockies as the stack here. And the Rockies aren't a good offense by any means either, but I like their matchup more. They're facing Luke Weaver, and Weaver has been good in the not-so-distant past, but last year was pretty rough. He had a 6.58 ERA for the full season and a 4.52 skill interactive ERA. We did see Weaver tinkering throughout the year, trying to improve those numbers. He was cognizant of the fact that his performance had taken a step back. His cutter was getting just obliterated. So we saw Weaver basically cut that pitch out of his repertoire over his final 5 starts. But the peripheral numbers for Weaver in that time actually got worse. He had a 5.00 skill interactive ERA. He did look pretty good in the spring, but now he has to improve a lot while going to Coors Field. So I've liked Weaver in the past. I've been into him. I've definitely used him in DFS. I'd love to be wrong here, but for now, I do think the best move is to stack the Rockies and then reevaluate if Weaver does wind up being good, with the caveat that they're not very good, but regardless, there is that. This will actually be just the second time this year the Rockies have faced a righty, because they were facing the Dodgers before. The first time they had Ryan Maltapia batting leadoff. Garrett Hampson was second. Ryan McMahon hit 6th. I'm not sure if Hampson will bat second again tonight, but noteworthy he was there the first time. Of those guys, I do like McMahon quite a bit. He struck out a lot last year, like an aggressive amount, but he also had a 46% hard hit rate against righties overall and an 11.2% barrel rate versus all pitchers. He is $3,500. So I think that Tapia, Hampson, McMahon, all worth considering depending on who winds up playing and who's at a good spot in the order, in addition to the actual good hitters in this lineup. But McMahon is my favorite of that bunch. And I will say, with Giolito's salary being under $10,000, you can get to guys like Trevor Story. So don't write off the studs. I'm just focusing on these mid-range plays because they are affordable no matter what you do elsewhere. But I do think you can get to the studs in this Rockies lineup for tonight. The prime places to turn for value in my eyes for this slate are the Blue Jays and the Rangers. Both of them are good matchups. The Rangers offense is not necessarily great, so we'll favor the Jays over them, but I'm okay with both teams here. Let's start with the Jays, and there's a lot to like here. They're facing Dane Dunning, and Dunning could wind up being a short stint guy, as it was rumored that he would work in tandem with others previously, which would mean shorter outing. He can work more as like a reliever, and that's not a great thing, but he doesn't necessarily project as a shutdown type pitcher. He made 7 starts in the big leagues last year. He had a 25% strikeout rate with a 9% walk rate, and those numbers were good. But you have to remember, though, that those numbers came against a lot of very weak competition. He had 7 strikeouts against the Tigers and the Royals to open things up last year. And as he got a longer leash and went deeper into games, his stuff became less effective. He didn't lean on his slider as much. He went to his sinker more often. In the 4 starts where they did give him a longer leash, he had a 4.77 skill interactive ERA with a 21% strikeout rate. So the question is, how much will he be able to use that slider? If he's able to go in short bursts and lean on it a lot, he could be really solid. But if not, he's probably going to get in some pretty big trouble. So I am in on the Blue Jays here. They don't have George Springer, but even without him, it's a 113 WRC plus for them against righties. So keep that in mind. They're a good offense. With that said, if Vlad Guerrero Jr. can't play, I would downgrade them quite a bit. He got hit in the hand yesterday. He did stay in to finish the game, but he may need a day of rest depending on how that hand feels. So if Vlad is out, I will be more skeptical of this team. But they've still got some guys who can hit, even if he can't go. Kevin Biggio is solid. He's only $2,700. Marcus Semien off to a good start. He's $3,100. Rowdy Tellez is super low salary, $2,200. Could move up in the order if Vlad is out. So you've got options here. I would hope that he plays because he's a boost to that offense in general, and he's just he's fun. But keep an eye on that for sure. And we could get some value from the Jays, even if he cannot go. As for the Rangers, they get Tanner Roark here, and he used to be a guy whose calling card was limiting hard contact, and that's an ability that he lost last year. Roark allowed a 13% barrel rate across 11 starts, which is a super high mark, and he did that while getting just a 19% strikeout rate with an 11% walk rate. That led to a 6.80 ERA. His skill interactive ERA was 5.36. So both the results and the peripherals were pretty bad, and he's been good in the past. So that could mean that he's due to bounce back, due for some regression, but 8.44 ERA for him in the spring, and it seems like he let up a lot of hard contact there. So I don't think we're going to see the 2019 or 2018 version of Roark. I think 2020 is probably a better indicator of what to expect going forward. As far as platoon splits with Roark, he actually struggled way more with righties than with lefties, which would be a concern against a very lefty-heavy Rangers lineup. But in 2019, he had more normal splits, so I would expect lefties to get better against him this year. And if they do, the Rangers would be well-positioned to take advantage of that. So there's a lot to like here. The offense itself is bad, really bad, but they won't get many matchups better than this. So I think there is enough for us to be into the Rangers here as an option for tonight's slate. Nate Lowe off to a pretty good start, which has led to his salary going up. He's $3,300. It's encouraging to see him play well after what was almost a lost year last year. He has an 11.8% barrel rate for his career. That's not bad for $3,300. David Dahl seems healthy, which is a key for him. So they've got some guys here. There is some shakiness because of the concerns, but I'm willing to take some swipes. I will say I like the super low salaried value options on the Blue Jays better than I like the ones on the Rangers, but the Rangers match is better. So kind of play that how you will. But I think that I'd go Blue Jays over Rangers overall for today. Let's finish up with things to watch for this slate. I didn't mention the Rays in the stacking section, mostly because the weather is pretty rough there. It's in the 50s, so it's definitely a downgrade for their sticks, but I think you can get there if you want to. The reason I didn't, outside of the weather, is that most of the guys we like on the Rays are lefties, and they're facing a lefty, Martin Perez, but Perez didn't strike out many lefties last year, and guys like Brandon Lowe can hit lefties for sure. You look at their numbers, they're very good against lefties. So it's just not my preference to stack this team specifically against the lefties. So the Rays could be as high as second on our stacking list, depending on your comfort level with the lefty-on-lefty spots. And I'm very good with the righties, but I think the weather combined with the lefty-heavy nature of the good hitters in their lineup makes me prefer to go elsewhere with my stacks. Another place you could go for stacks is the Mets. They're facing Chase Anderson. It is warmer in New York than Boston, so that's good. They got some strikeouts in the spring. Chase Anderson did, but he also walked a lot of guys. So that's definitely a concern. Also, this game is in Philadelphia, not New York. So keep that in mind. It's actually warmer in Philadelphia than it is in Boston. Anderson, 7 starts last year, allowed a 10.7% barrel rate. That's a good chunk above average. And the Mets had a lot of guys who can make hard contact. They got a 122 WRC plus against righties since the start of last year. They're not super high salary. We got Jeff McNeil, Brandon Nimmo, Dom Smith, all at $3,100 or lower. So I think the Mets are a legitimately good option. If you're asking me realistically who I will stack more tonight between the Mets and the Rays, probably the Mets. I would feel pretty good about that, actually. So I think the Mets are pretty close to the Rangers and Jays, too. So it's kind of like a 5-stack night. So to me, from a roster construction perspective, I would say commit to your pitchers, differentiate with your stacks. I think all 5 of those stacks we discussed are in play, and potentially the Diamondbacks too. So kind of filter through based on that, find the ones you like most, but I think all 6 of those teams we discussed for stacking could potentially be options for tonight. Finally, there are some pitchers who I want to see tonight to see what they look like, but don't necessarily want to use for DFS. Those guys, James Paxton, Adbert Alzolay, and Aaron Sanchez. Paxton had visa issues coming from Canada, so I'm not sure what his pitch count will look like. Kind of got a late start to spring, but reports on his velocity this spring are very good, so that's encouraging. Alzolay had good numbers last year, but they never really let him get a full pitch count. I want to see what his pitch count is tonight, because I didn't really, looking into his spring stuff, didn't give me a lot of confidence that I'll let him go. Obviously, the Brewers is not a great offense, so I'd want to use someone who had good stuff last year, but I can't really with his pitch count. So working on that to see if we can get him lengthened that a bit. As far as Sanchez, good stuff. And the Giants have a good track record for turning guys around. Anthony DeSclafani, good results last night. Not the best peripheral numbers, but I have some faith in the Giants given the Kevin Gausman stuff. So I'm not going to use Sanchez, Alzolay, or Paxton tonight, but I do want to see how they look. I want to see their pitch counts so I can determine how to handle them their next time out. So watching those guys, but not using them for DFS. Thankfully, got other really good options between Peralta and the 3 studs, so shouldn't be a tough time filling out lineups for tonight. That is all the time that we have for today here on the Solo Shot. But as mentioned, we are back with you 3:30 p.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages, taking your questions. Brandon Gadula is up first at 3:30 talking the Masters. I'll be with you 4 p.m. talking MLB DFS, transitioning right from one to the other. You can stay on the same stream, and we will cover both those sports today, 3:30 to 4:30 on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Make sure you are subscribed on your platform of choice. If you have questions for me before 4 p.m., I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your lineups for tonight for MLB DFS. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.